There are moments when advice feels empty. You've heard the phrases, the encouragement, the instructions on what to do next, but none of it seems to reach you. Because when everything feels heavy, what you need is not direction, it's the strength to take even one more step. You don't always talk about those moments. From the outside, everything may look fine. You're still showing up, still functioning, still doing what needs to be done. But inside, there's a quiet strain, like you're carrying more than you can explain. And that weight doesn't always come from one thing. It builds over time. Responsibilities, expectations, pressure you put on yourself, pressure that comes from others. It layers slowly until even simple things begin to feel heavier than they should. At first, you push through it like you always have. You tell yourself to stay strong, to keep moving, to not fall behind. But there comes a point where pushing feels different, where it starts to feel like you're just holding everything together. And in that moment, something shifts, not in your situation, but in how it feels. The energy drops, the clarity fades, and the thought appears, quietly but clearly. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. That thought doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've reached a point where something inside you needs to be strengthened, not explained, not analyzed, but strengthened. Because understanding what to do is not the same as having the strength to do it. And that's where most people struggle. They look for more answers, more strategies, more information, when what they really need is something that reaches deeper than logic. Something that reconnects them with the part of themselves that keeps going when everything feels uncertain. Because that part is still there. It hasn't disappeared. It's just been buried under repetition, under doubt, under the constant pressure of everything you've been carrying for so long. And unless something interrupts that pattern, it stays hidden. You've felt it before, even if only for a moment. That point where you could have stopped, but didn't. Where you were tired, unsure, maybe even overwhelmed. But something inside you pushed you forward anyway. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to keep you moving. That is strength. Not the kind you talk about, the kind you rely on. And the problem is, most people don't train it. They wait for it to appear when they need it. But strength doesn't work that way. It grows through repetition, through what you feed your mind when things are difficult, because your mind responds to what it hears most. If it hears doubt, it slows you down. If it hears hesitation, it makes you pause. But if it begins to hear something different, something steady, something certain, your response begins to change. At first, it's small, almost unnoticeable. You don't feel dramatically stronger. The weight doesn't disappear. But something inside you becomes just a little more stable, just enough to take the next step, and then another, and another. And over time, those small steps begin to build something powerful. Not motivation, not excitement, but resilience. The ability to continue even when nothing feels easy. That's when you begin to notice the shift. You respond differently. You hesitate less. You move forward even when your energy is low. And slowly, what once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable. Not because your situation changed, but because you did. Because strength is not something that arrives when everything is perfect. It's something that develops when things are not. when you continue anyway, when you repeat the right thoughts, when you refuse to stop. What you're about to hear is not meant to give you answers. It's meant to give you something stronger than that, something you can return to when your energy drops, something you can repeat when your thoughts begin to drift, something that reinforces the part of you that refuses to give up. So don't just listen once. Let it stay with you. Let it repeat. Let it build. Because this is not about learning something new. It's about strengthening something that's already there. And once that strength comes back into focus, you won't just move forward. You'll carry yourself through anything that comes next. There comes a moment in every man's life when the words of others, no matter how wise or well-intended, no longer reach him in the way they once did. He hears them, understands them, and may even agree with them, yet they do not move him. They do not produce action. They do not restore energy. And in that moment, he begins to sense that what he needs is not more instruction, but something deeper. This moment is often misunderstood. It is not a sign that guidance has lost its value, nor that the man has become unwilling to listen. It is a sign that he has reached a point where external direction is no longer sufficient to carry him forward. The weight he feels is not one that can be lifted by explanation alone. It requires reinforcement from within. For many years, a man relies on advice, direction, and examples to shape his path. He learns, he applies, and he progresses. These influences serve him well, guiding his actions and helping him avoid unnecessary error. But there comes a stage where knowledge is no longer the limitation. He already knows what to do, yet knowing does not always produce movement. This is the distinction that must be understood. There is a difference between understanding and strength. Understanding shows the way. Strength allows a man to walk it. And when strength begins to weaken, no amount of direction can replace it. There are countless individuals who have reached this point without recognizing its meaning. They continue to seek answers, believing that something new will restore their ability to move forward. They listen to more instruction, gather more information, and attempt to apply more ideas. Yet the result remains unchanged, not because the information is incorrect, but because it is not what is needed. What is required is not more knowledge. It is renewed strength. This strength does not come from outside sources. It is not given, it is awakened. There is a buildup that leads to this moment, a gradual accumulation of effort, responsibility, and internal pressure. A man continues to carry what is required of him, often without pause, often without release. From the outside, his life appears stable. He fulfills his duties, maintains his role, and continues to function. Yet internally, something begins to change. The weight becomes noticeable, not in a single moment, but over time. What once felt manageable begins to feel heavier. What once required effort now requires more. And what once was done without thought now demands attention. This is not failure, it is accumulation. And when accumulation reaches a certain point, it demands adjustment. Many men attempt to respond to this by increasing effort. They push harder, extend themselves further, and attempt to overcome the feeling through force. For a time, this may work, but eventually, force alone becomes insufficient. The body continues, the mind continues, but something beneath begins to resist. This resistance is not weakness, it is a signal that something within must be strengthened. There are examples of individuals who, despite outward success, reached this exact point. They had achieved what they set out to do, maintained their responsibilities, and demonstrated discipline. Yet internally, they felt a quiet depletion, not dramatic, not visible, but present. Others observed them as capable, reliable, even strong. Yet they themselves felt the strain. This contrast is important, for it shows that strength, as perceived by others, is not always the same as strength as experienced within. The man who recognizes this does not deny it. He examines it. He begins to understand that what he is experiencing is not the absence of ability, but the absence of reinforcement. He has continued to give, to act, to carry, but he has not strengthened the source from which these actions arise. There is an affirmation that may be introduced at this stage. I awaken the strength within me that does not depend on circumstance. This statement does not promise immediate relief. It introduces awareness. It directs attention inward, where the true source of strength resides. As this awareness develops, the individual begins to observe his condition differently. He no longer seeks to eliminate the weight entirely. He seeks to increase his capacity to carry it. This shift is subtle, yet powerful. For when the focus moves from removing pressure to increasing strength, the relationship to difficulty changes. There is also a change in how he responds to external input. He no longer depends on it to initiate action. He uses it to support what is already active within him. Advice becomes supplementary, not essential. Direction becomes a guide, not a requirement. Others begin to notice this change. They see a man who is less affected by circumstances, less dependent on constant encouragement, and more stable in his actions. He appears composed, not because his situation has become easier, but because his internal condition has become stronger. This perception carries influence, for those who demonstrate internal stability are often regarded with respect. They are seen as dependable, as individuals who do not require constant support to continue, and through this perception, their position is strengthened. There is a deeper realization that emerges from this process. That strength is not something to be searched for in moments of need. It is something to be cultivated in moments of strain. The first, man begins to see that what he feeds his mind, what he repeats internally, and what he chooses to focus upon determines his capacity. If his thoughts reinforce doubt, his strength diminishes. If they reinforce stability, his strength increases. This realization introduces responsibility, for he can no longer attribute his condition solely to external factors. He must consider what he is allowing to repeat within. There may be resistance in this stage. The mind is accustomed to seeking relief, to looking outward for support, to believing that strength will return on its own. Yet the individual who has seen clearly recognizes that this is insufficient. He must participate in his own reinforcement. He must direct his thoughts. He must strengthen what remains. Over time, This begins to produce a different experience. The weight does not disappear. The responsibilities remain. The circumstances continue. But the man is no longer affected in the same way. He carries what he must carry with greater stability. He moves forward with less hesitation. He responds with more control. This is the beginning of true strength, not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to continue within it. Thus, the moment when external direction fails is not a setback. It is a turning point, a point at which the man is called to move beyond dependence on instruction and into reliance on his own internal power. The man who friends understands this does not seek more advice. He seeks to awaken what is already within him. And in that awakening, he discovers a strength that does not fade when circumstances become difficult, but grows because of them. There is a form of pressure that does not come from a single event, nor from any one responsibility, but from the gradual accumulation of many things carried at once. It is not always visible, nor is it often spoken of. A man continues to move, continues to perform, and continues to fulfill what is required of him. Yet beneath this movement there exists a quiet weight that increases over time. This weight is rarely acknowledged directly. It is composed of expectations, those placed upon him by others, and those he places upon himself. It is formed by responsibilities that cannot be ignored, by standards that must be maintained, and by the constant effort to remain steady regardless of circumstance. Each of these in isolation may be manageable, but together they begin to form something heavier. The difficulty lies not only in what is carried, but in how it is carried. Many men develop the habit of holding everything within. They do not release what they think, nor do they examine what they feel. They continue forward, believing that strength is demonstrated through silence, that endurance is proven by how much can be carried without expression. For a time, this appears effective. The man remains composed. He fulfills his duties. He does not falter in visible ways. Yet internally, something begins to shift. The thoughts that are not expressed do not disappear. They repeat, they circulate, they return again and again, often without resolution. And through this repetition, they begin to create pressure. This pressure is not always recognized immediately. It builds slowly, almost imperceptibly. A man may not be able to identify its source, yet he feels its presence. There is a sense of heaviness, a reduction in clarity, and a growing effort required to maintain the same level of performance. This is the effect of unexamined thought. When ideas are allowed to repeat without direction, they accumulate. They do not organize themselves. They do not resolve on their own. They remain active, occupying space, influencing perception, and affecting response. There are many individuals who are admired for their discipline, their consistency, and their ability to continue under pressure. Others see them as strong, capable, and reliable. Yet these same individuals often carry a level of internal strain that is not visible to those around them. This contrast is important, for it reveals that outward strength does not always reflect inner condition. A man may appear steady while internally experiencing tension. He may perform effectively while carrying more than he realizes, and over time, this unaddressed weight begins to affect him, not dramatically, but steadily. He may notice that his thoughts feel crowded, that his attention is divided, and that even simple decisions require more effort than before. He may find himself less patient, less focused, or less certain, not because he lacks ability, but because his internal space is occupied. In contrast, there are those who come to understand the importance of managing what is carried within. They do not assume that thoughts will resolve themselves. They examine them. They bring awareness to what repeats, and they begin to direct it. Such individuals do not eliminate pressure entirely. They organize it. They decide what deserves attention and what does not. They release what is unnecessary and reinforce what is useful. There is an affirmation that supports this process. I release what I carry unnecessarily and strengthen what remains. This statement introduces discernment. It allows the individual to separate what must be held from what may be let go. As this awareness develops, the individual begins to observe his internal patterns more clearly. He notices which thoughts return frequently, which ones create tension, and which ones contribute nothing to his progress. This observation does not create burden, it creates clarity. He begins to understand that not every thought requires attention. Not every concern requires repetition. Not every pressure must be carried. This realization creates space, and space reduces strain. There is also a shift in how he defines strength. He no longer associates it solely with endurance. He associates it with control. The ability to manage what is held within becomes just as important as the ability to continue outwardly. Others begin to notice this change. They see a man who appears less burdened, yet no less capable. His presence becomes more grounded, his responses more measured, and his actions more deliberate. There is a calmness that was not present before, not because his responsibilities have changed, but because his relationship to them has. This perception carries influence. For those who demonstrate control under pressure are often regarded as stable. They are trusted, not only for their ability to act, but for their ability to remain composed while doing so. There is also a change in how the individual experiences his own thoughts. They become less overwhelming, more organized, more manageable. He is no longer reacting to everything that arises within him. He is selecting what he will reinforce. It must be understood that this process does not require the elimination of all pressure. Pressure, in itself, is not the problem. It is unmanaged pressure that creates strain. When directed properly, pressure may even become a source of focus. There may be moments where the old pattern returns, where thoughts begin to accumulate without examination, and where the familiar sense of weight reappears. Yet the individual who has gained awareness recognizes this early. He does not allow it to build unchecked. He addresses it. He observes, selects, and directs. Through this, the accumulation is reduced before it becomes overwhelming. Over time, the effect becomes clear. The individual is able to carry what is required without feeling consumed by it. His thoughts support his actions rather than interfere with them. His internal condition becomes aligned with his external behavior. There are examples of individuals who, after years of carrying unexamined pressure, began to apply this principle and experienced a significant shift not in their responsibilities, but in their experience of them. They remain just as active, just as committed, yet far less burdened. Others often describe such individuals as calm or composed, yet what they are observing is not the absence of pressure, but the presence of control. Thus, the burden of silent pressure is not created by what a man must do, but by what he allows to repeat without direction. The man who understands this does not attempt to remove all weight. He manages it. He releases what is unnecessary. He strengthens what is essential. And in doing so, he transforms pressure from something that drains him into something that he can carry with stability and control. There comes a point in a man's journey where effort begins to feel different, not because the tasks have changed, nor because his responsibilities have increased beyond measure, but because something within him no longer responds in the same way. What once felt natural now requires intention. What once moved easily now meets resistance. And in that resistance, a question begins to form quietly, yet unmistakably. How much longer can I continue like this? This question is not always spoken. Often, it is only felt. It appears in moments of stillness, in pauses between actions, in brief intervals where the mind is no longer occupied. It does not demand attention, yet it lingers. And when it lingers long enough, it begins to influence how a man sees his own capacity. This is the moment of internal friction. It is not failure. It is not collapse. It is a point of tension between what has been sustained and what must now be reinforced. Many men misunderstand this moment. They interpret it as a sign that they are nearing their limit, that something is wrong, or that they are no longer capable of continuing as before. In response, they may hesitate. They may slow their movement, question their direction, or begin to withdraw in subtle ways. Yet what they are experiencing is not the end of strength. It is the call to deepen it. For friction, by its nature, appears when something must be strengthened. It is the resistance that forms when existing capacity is no longer sufficient for what is being asked. And rather than indicating that a man should stop, it indicates that he must reinforce what allows him to continue. There are many examples of individuals who reach this point while maintaining outward success. They continued to fulfill their roles, meet expectations, and perform at a high level. Yet internally, they encountered moments where continuation no longer felt certain. The effort required to maintain their pace became more noticeable. Others around them did not see this. They saw consistency. They saw discipline. They saw strength. But the individual himself felt the friction. This contrast reveals something important, that internal experience and external perception are not always aligned. A man may appear strong while feeling uncertain, and it is in this moment that his response determines what follows. If he interprets the friction as a signal to withdraw, he begins to reduce his movement. He becomes cautious, hesitant, and less certain in his actions. Over time, this leads to a gradual decline, not because he lacked ability, but because he responded incorrectly to the signal. But if he interprets the friction as a signal to strengthen, something different occurs. He does not retreat, he reinforces. There is an affirmation that supports this shift. When I feel resistance, I strengthen, not retreat. This statement changes the meaning of friction. It removes the association with limitation and replaces it with opportunity for growth. As this understanding develops, the individual begins to observe his moments of hesitation more closely. He notices when effort begins to feel heavier, when doubt begins to appear, and when his inclination is to pause rather than proceed. Instead of accepting these moments as indicators to stop, he examines them as points where reinforcement is required. This examination creates awareness, and awareness creates choice. He begins to see that the feeling of uncertainty is not a command, it is a condition, and conditions may be influenced. There is also a shift in how he relates to effort itself. He no longer expects it to feel easy at all times. He understands that there will be periods where effort demands more from him. Rather than resisting this, he accepts it as part of progression. Others begin to notice this change. They see a man who does not falter when things become difficult. He continues, not with force alone, but with steadiness. There is a resilience in his actions that distinguishes him. He does not appear unaffected by pressure, but he appears capable of moving through it. This perception carries weight. For those who continue under pressure are often regarded as dependable. Those who remain steady in moments of uncertainty are seen as strong, and those who respond to difficulty with control are often given greater responsibility. There is also a change in how the individual experiences his own effort. It becomes more deliberate, more focused, less dependent on how he feels in the moment. He begins to act not based on comfort, but based on decision. This is the beginning of a deeper form of strength, one that is not dependent on ease, but on commitment. It must be understood that friction will not disappear entirely. It is part of growth. It is encountered whenever a man moves beyond his current level of capacity. The goal is not to eliminate it, but to respond to it correctly. There may still be moments where the thought returns, where continuation feels uncertain, where effort feels heavy, and where the mind suggests pause. Yet the individual who has gained awareness recognizes these moments quickly. He does not allow them to define his direction. He acknowledges them and continues. Over time, this response begins to produce a powerful effect. The friction that once created hesitation begins to strengthen him. The resistance that once slowed him down becomes something he can move through with greater ease. His capacity increases. Not suddenly, but steadily. There are examples of individuals who, by consistently responding to friction with reinforcement, developed a level of resilience that set them apart. They did not avoid difficulty, they used it. And through this, they became stronger than those who sought comfort. Others often describe such individuals as mentally strong. Yet what they are observing is not the absence of friction. It is mastery over it. Thus, the moment where continuation feels uncertain is not a point of decline. It is a point of decision. The man may choose to interpret it as limitation or as an invitation to strengthen. And the man who chooses to strengthen does not stop at that moment. He grows through it. For it is not the absence of resistance that defines strength, but the ability to continue in its presence. And in that continuation, a deeper, more enduring strength is formed. There is a force within every man that operates continuously, whether he is aware of it or not. It does not rest, it does not pause, and it does not wait for instruction. It responds only to what it receives repeatedly. This force is the mind, and its condition determines whether a man weakens under pressure or grows stronger within it. Most men do not direct this force intentionally. They allow their thoughts to form as reactions to circumstance. When difficulty arises, their thinking reflects it. When uncertainty appears, their thoughts begin to mirror that uncertainty. Over time, this repetition creates a pattern that reinforces the very condition they wish to overcome. This is not because they lack strength. It is because they are feeding the wrong signals into the source of it. The mind does not distinguish between what is helpful and what is harmful. It accepts what is repeated. It strengthens what is reinforced. And it builds upon whatever is given to it consistently. If doubt is repeated, doubt becomes familiar. If hesitation is reinforced, hesitation becomes natural. There is a critical principle that must be understood. Strength is not summoned in moments of need. It is formed in moments of repetition. A man cannot expect to think in a strong manner when pressure arises if he has not conditioned his thinking beforehand. In the absence of preparation, the mind returns to what it knows best, its most repeated patterns. There are many individuals who attempt to overcome difficult moments by forcing themselves to think differently in the moment itself. They try to replace doubt with certainty, hesitation with action, and fatigue with energy. Yet without prior conditioning, this effort feels unnatural and often does not last. In contrast, there are those who understand the necessity of preparing the mind in advance. They do not wait for difficulty to arise before directing their thoughts. They establish patterns of thinking that support them, and they reinforce these patterns through repetition. Such individuals do not rely on sudden motivation. They rely on trained response. There is an affirmation that supports this process. What I repeat within becomes the strength I carry outward. This statement introduces responsibility for internal dialogue. It reminds the individual that what he allows to repeat within him determines how he responds outwardly. As this understanding develops, the individual begins to observe his thinking more closely.